What makes power and authority legitimate? What makes it work? What makes it fail to work? People here believe in the laws, but in Malawi and in Africa, the laws don't seem to have as much weight.
Do you believe corruption remains one of Africa's greatest obstacles despite decades of reforms?
Corruption in Africa is in fact direct output of a bad system of governance that is there. Leadership can transform a country. That's a fact. Leadership matters. And I think that one of the challenges that we have in Africa is that the framework that is supposed to constrain our leaders are usually weak.
So do African nations need to rethink relationship between constitutional law, culture and traditional leadership?
That's exactly what I'm saying. There is a way of looking at Africa that needs to be done by Africans. Africa needs to begin to look at how we can redesign governance in Africa that makes sense for Africans.
Hello, welcome to the show. I'm Philip Shamamba, your host. Today we are very, very honored to be with a very special guest, Mr. Allan Ntata. Mr. Ntata, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Philip.
We are very honored to have you
It's
today.
a pleasure
How
to
are you
be
doing?
here. I'm good, thank you. It's quite hot, but I'm surviving.
You're surviving?
Yes.
It seems that we are in Botswana.
It looks like, or the Kalahari, or the Sahara.
Or the Sahara, the desert. Mr. Ntata.
Yes.
Like I said, we are very honored to have you in our show.
You give me too much credit.
Yeah. Well, you deserve it.
I don't know about that.
Because if you look at your resume, it's very impressive. You've done so much.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah. You are a barrister, huh?
Yes, I am. I trained here in the UK.
In the UK?
Yeah, I trained, qualified here, then went back to Malawi and did a little bit of work there, then kind of came full circle and found myself back here again.
And you have worked as a special advisor to the late Mutharika,
yes,
President of Malawi.
Yes, I
did. A special advisor.
Special Legal Counsel.
Legal Counsel.
Yes, yes.
And that means you have been in very high level of Malawi politics.
Oh, that's correct. Yes, I was lucky, and I was quite young. It was a few years ago now. I think you're looking at maybe 10, maybe even 10 years ago now, over 10 years. So I was much younger than I am now, which means that it was really a great opportunity and a privilege that at that young age I was provided an opportunity to serve at that high level. Yes.
And on top of that, you are a corporate governance specialist.
Yes.
You are a political commentator. You are an author, a musician.
Yes.
How do you do all that?
Actually, when you think about it, there is, a lot of people think that these are sort of different lanes, but I like to think of them as really just different expressions of the same trajectory. When you think about my early formative years, I think they're the ones that created this path because I was always challenging authority. I was a very troublesome child. And I think the reason, as I look back now, was because I always was trying to find out where authority and power comes from. And when it didn't make sense, when I didn't feel legitimate to me, then I could challenge it, even if the rules said that that's the rule. I want to know what's behind the rule and what's legitimizing this rule. But then when you think about things like governance, they come from that. They come from regulations. They come from rules. And you think about power and you think about law. It's all to do with the same thing. Now, the music aspect, that's just expressing the same ideas but differently. If you think about some of the music that I write, a lot of it is social commentary. And music is important because it allows me, and as a lot of people know, it allows you to express ideas in a different way. And that's what I do with the music. Most of the music is expressing the same sort of ideas.
Because I was listening to one of your songs. I saw the video on YouTube.
Yes.
A well-written text. The music is good.
Oh, thank you.
And that's what I was thinking.
You must be the only one that's been watching that thing. I don't think I've got any likes.
So you had about 65 likes. Many people know you from your role in the government.
Yeah.
But your journey began long before the State House.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about your upbringing in Malawi and the experiences that shaped your passion for law and public services.
Yes, I mean, as I was alluding to it earlier, especially from my secondary school days, that's when I started challenging authority a lot. You know, boarding school in Africa, you get sometimes really harsh schoolmasters, and they just want to, you know, be very authoritative, very dictatorial in their approach. And I always run into trouble because I always challenged that. And that for me, I think, formed those early thoughts of saying, what makes authority legitimate? And it is that upbringing that really exposed me to that. And then when you go to African societies in the village, you want to see how people are relating to the politics and to the powers that they are. And I immediately realized that there was a disparity in the sense that, you know, what we were studying in class, what we were studying at school, and what we were experiencing when you go to the village. That's why it's called the village and the town, and the village and the city. There's a very big difference. I mean, when you know, some of these ideas became clearer when you come to societies like this one, where there's no real difference in that regard. Why is it that in Africa there is? And that never really clicked for me, but I observed it, and it's stuck in my mind. And later on, I tried to unravel it.
So that gives experience of different worlds.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So you have studied and worked in Malawi, in the United Kingdom, and Australia.
Yeah.
How these different legal systems influence your understanding of justice and governance in Africa? Yeah.
So, you know, just sort of going back and piggybacking on the earlier point that I was making, that I already noticed those differences, and then I was lucky enough to be able to come here and in the UK to study law. And when I was studying here with my friends, I could see that, you know, fellow students, they believed in the systems. They
very much so.
They believed in their systems. Their society, you know, was very nicely legitimate. People believed in the rule of law and so on. And I was passionate about that when I was studying my my law degree, my first degree. I could see that this works. This makes a lot of sense. But then I went to work and I worked here, you know, after that, and everything was good. But when I went to work in Malawi, the first institution that I joined was the Anti-Corruption Bureau, and the Anti-Corruption Bureau in Malawi was a very, very strange place for me to work.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
You are anti-corruption prosecutor.
Yes. Yes, I was, and basically that shaped that experience of going from here, where law worked, everything worked, and working in an anti-corruption bureau and the criminal law system in Malawi. I immediately noticed the difference, and the difference was that people here believe in the laws, but in Malawi and in Africa in general, because you see, working for the anti-corruption bureaus gave me the opportunity to travel around Africa, because we have all these collaborative programs where you go to Zimbabwe, in the SADC and so forth and so on. So you discuss these issues with fellow prosecutors, and you discover that the problem is the same. The laws don't seem to have as much weight as they do when we were studying. So I was thinking, oh, what's going on here? Because you know, out there, people trust the laws. So there's a big difference
between what you have studied,
yes, and the application. So when I speak about comparative environments, I discovered one thing, and that's what has shaped a lot of my work later on, is that laws do not just exist in a vacuum. The laws designs institutions like we design democratic institutions that we have to be negotiated with the lived experiences of the people which they are supposed to serve. And when that does not happen, then you discover that other things get in the way to try and make this make sense of it. And in Africa, most of Africa, what has stepped in to kind of bridge the gap is political power. Exactly. So you find that political power in Africa is the one that mediates what laws should matter and what laws shouldn't matter. So and from that
power,
point, yes,
pushing,
yes, exactly. And it was from that point that I began to really observe power and really wonder about what makes power be above the law, what makes law be above power. And this has been really the dilemma that I've been trying to solve through my career.
Have you solved it?
I think so.
I
might
one of your books is talking about. I mean, I'll advise people watching to read, because you have 3 or 4 books, very interesting ones that talk about what you just said, the power, the balance.
Yeah, because my life's work, when you think about it, especially at postgraduate level, has been the study of power. What makes power and authority legitimate? What makes it work? What makes it fail to work? And especially, why is law and why is authority and law such a problem in certain societies, but not a big problem in other societies? And that's the dilemma, and that's what I articulate in the books you're speaking about. I've written the African Manifesto, strictly coming out of that particular observation that it looks to me like these are the problems that Africa has, and maybe to solve them, this is what we can do.
You have served as a legal counsel to the president's late Bingu or Mutharika during one of the most consequential periods in Malawi's political history. What were the greatest lessons you learned from working so closely with the president?
Quite a lot of things. First of all, I learned how power can transform a person.
Right.
Were
you transformed?
Myself, yes, certainly to a certain degree. I had to make adjustments because the first thing is that power does not just transform the person who holds it. It also transforms everyone around that person. It changes the way people relate to it. It dictates how people relate to power. And you have to be very, very careful, because either you can serve it or you can make it serve you.
Exactly.
And that's one of the issues. And then the other one is that leadership, especially African leadership, and I think this is leadership across the board, not just in Africa. Leadership is a continuing arrangement between you and the people that you are leading. You have to always calibrate the legitimacy of your leadership. A lot of leaders think that once they get consent at election time, then they don't need to renew their mandate, and so they always point to the past, whatever you have done in the past. Bingu Mutharika's first term, for example, was very, very successful, and because of that, he suddenly began to feel that because he had done well and people had approved a certain part of his rule, he had acquired the license to rule in any way he likes. Yes, and so when there was criticism about certain moves that he was making later on in the time, in his tenure, he was point to the past. But leadership is not about pointing to the past. It's in fact giving people hope for the future and ensuring that people still trust you for the present. And I think that's one of the things that I saw when I was working close to him.
So looking back, what do you believe President Mutharika did right? What lessons should future African leaders learn from both his success and challenges?
I think what he did right was to demonstrate that leadership can transform a country. That's a fact. Leadership matters. In one of my books, upcoming, this one is not published yet, I call it The Power of Two. I say that the two there is leadership, but leadership alone is not enough. The charisma of the leader, the vision, and all these things that we want in a leader, that's important. But the other second pillar of leading is you as a leader should find ways of creating institutions that can limit your power. And I think that Bingu Mutharika, what he did well was make a nation believe again. We are coming out of a 10-year rule of Bakili Muluzi, which was horrendous in terms of economic performance and all those things that people really felt that was a lost period, the 10 years. Bingu Mutharika came with a vision that was real, and people caught on to that vision. And so that showed to me that he did that well, and that demonstrated that leadership can work. But it also demonstrates that you cannot rest on your laurels just after you have just done one or two good things. You have to continue, like I said, you have to continually calibrate your vision. So if your vision, first of all, was to build a road, and you build that road, then that doesn't mean that afterwards you have to sit down. Because you need to start telling people that we're going to build more roads.
In French, they say, rien n'est jamais acquis, which means nothing is never acquired. You have always to work. I think that's
the point. That's the point, and I think for me that's what leaders can learn from the Mutharika time, is that he was satisfied with the first few successes, and those few successes became the weakness, because they blinded him to the continued performance that was expected of him. You become a victim of your own success as a leader, and you must then live up to whatever you show people that you're capable of doing. You have to do more of that.
Right. But you witness the power from inside. You have just spoken about how people can change, right? So how does political power can change people, and what safeguards should exist to ensure leaders remain accountable?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. Like I said, the power of two, which is and it's interesting that you are asking exactly that question, because the answer is that it is the power of two. For leadership to work, you need to have the leadership, but then you have to have the right kind of constraining frameworks. And I think that one of the challenges that we have in Africa is that the framework that is supposed to constrain our leaders are usually weak. They are frameworks that do not do so. There is a very, very good reason for it, which I explore in my postgraduate work, which we can discuss maybe later on as we go. But it is very, very important for leadership to have a counterbalance, no matter how good, no matter how strong. You see, if you look at countries that have been successful, they can have, and I'll give a very good example, if you think about the United States, they moved from Obama to Donald Trump. Now, these are two different characters, but the country is not feeling the strain. The country as such, it's feeling, in certain respects it is, but when you think about the larger masses, the tremor of the difference, of the change, is not felt as much. Why is that? It is because in that country, the leadership is just one aspect of what creates balance in that country. The systems are there that ensure that if the leader is a rogue and an idiot, the country can still carry on, because the checks and balances of the idiocy is not going to overflow. If the leader is very, very smart and wants to exploit the system, again the checks and balances are there to ensure that the excesses do not actually disturb too much. And so that, I think, is the balance that we need in leadership.
That's a good example. Obama and Donald. But they had Joe Biden in the middle.
Yeah, but
what do you think?
They had, of course, they had someone else in the middle. But the point that I'm making is not necessarily about the individuals.
So you see, Joe Biden is close to Obama, or
Joe Biden was sort of middle ground, wasn't he? When you think about in terms of ability, it's a personal opinion. It's a subjective opinion. I thought that Obama was a really, really great leader, and I think that Donald Trump is probably on the other side, and Joe Biden probably sits somewhere in the middle. But the point is that regardless of who is leading, you find that the country doesn't feel that change that in an excessive way, because the country has a system that ensures that these changes do not distract too much from things that are supposed to make a country work.
Well, having worked in anti-corruption and corporate governance, do you believe corruption remains one of Africa's greatest obstacles despite decades of reforms?
Yes, I think corruption remains one of the biggest challenges that Africa faces. But the problem is that we treat corruption as a deviation that comes from just single individuals breaking the laws that are there. Or we know, if you think about the donor approach, the capacity building approaches that are being popularized in Africa now, they will say it's an institutional problem. So if you have too much corruption, you need to go and examine the laws of that country and make better laws. My studies show that corruption in Africa is in fact the direct output of a bad system of governance that is there. So you cannot take it out, because it is a result of a framework that creates a deficit in legitimacy.
That's interesting. So would you see corruption as a political, cultural, or legal problem?
It is both. It's all three in the sense that corruption emerges when a system is not serving the interests of the people in the way that it should. Right. And so leaders come in and they discover that they cannot properly rule without corrupting and taking control of the system. And so corruption then emerges from there. So the problem really is that the system itself has been badly designed. Now, the bad design comes from the fact that law, power, and the lived reality, which I call normative reality of the people, the normative legitimacy, how you as a citizen, you allow that, yes, we agree that this power, these laws, and these are things that represent us as a people. That's legitimacy. Now, that legitimacy, when it's misaligned with political power, and it's misaligned with the laws that people see. You see, in Africa, in much of Africa, where corruption is rampant, as people say, you discover that the problem is, it's been diagnosed in all sorts of ways. A lot of writers have spoken about the fact that Africans live in two worlds. We have got our own community systems of legitimacy and authority, but we also have the democratic systems. And that's a clash, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. It means if we have two systems, it means that the two are misaligned. And because they are misaligned, there's a deficit on this side and a deficit on that side in terms of the governance. And as long as those deficits remain, corruption is never going to go away, because corruption is what bridges
it's a big problem, corruption.
Yes.
As anti-corruption prosecutor, what reforms can you recommend to African leaders?
I think as I've just said, that the first problem is the misalignment of the governance framework. We have taken on board democratic systems and across Africa, and they have come as foreign implants when you think about it, which have their own ways of operating, and then come to administer a group of people that groups of peoples that had their own ways of administrations. And so I think to solve the corruption problem, one of the things that I advocate, and I feel very passionately about it, is to redesign our governance frameworks so that complete overhaul of our governance systems. That is not to say that democracy is bad or that we should return to the pre-colonial days. But what we need to do is take what is good with the democratic system, the formalization of the system, but make sure that formalization takes into consideration some of the aspects of realities that are there in Africa. And if you do that and formalize that in our constitutions, you discover that corruption is going to be less.
Okay, talking about democratic systems, right? Your books challenge many accepted assumptions about democracy in Africa.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What do you think is fundamentally wrong with the current democratic model adopted across much of the continent?
I think what is wrong with it is that it was adopted without the important dimension of being conscious of the people who are supposed to govern. Democracy did not emerge or appear in Western global North societies in a vacuum. It appeared after hundreds of years of negotiating authority. Here in the UK, where we are today, they didn't always have democracy. They had kingdoms here. They had they had periods when the church was on top. Then they had periods when the kings were on top, and there was a whole lot of conflict. And then after a lot of bloodshed and a lot of things, thinkers said, no, maybe we need to move in this direction as society in order for us to create a balance. And that happened. But now what happened was this system was working so well on this side. And then when colonialism started happening after they had stabilized their systems, they said, well, the best system of governance is the one that we have here. Let's take it to the places where we have good colonies. But those colonies had their own systems, and those systems were completely subjected to the democratic system, and so they were suppressed. But that suppression didn't mean that they went away. It simply means that there were now two governing systems coexisting together. And for me, that is really the challenge of democracy. Democracy arrived as a system to control the colonies, and then we just adopted a system that is designed to control our colonies, and we adopted it without saying, no, wait a minute, this came with with the colonizer.
Yeah.
Why don't we first of all look at it,
observe, analyze,
see how we can now that we've got independence, let's see how we can adapt it so that it can really truly serve our people. Because it wasn't designed to serve our people; it was designed to serve the interests of somebody else who didn't live here. But the liberators. And you know, we thank them for the liberation, but I think that they quickly realized that the system was designed to be reigned over by one person. It was centralized, and they enjoyed the centralization so much that the idea of true liberation died quickly. Yes.
Okay, from democracy to political juridity, you argue that imported political system can become instrument of control, as you just said.
Yes.
What would governance model rooted in Africa reality look like?
There are many scholars, African scholars, that have discussed the problem of governance and the problem of the realities of how African governance was before democracy. Right. All right, before democracy arrived. You've got Mamdani, you've got Eke, you've got quite a few scholars that have discussed this issue, Mbembe and others. So for me, I think that we need to take these thoughts and look at democracy and then say, okay, what is the synergy that we can achieve in order to have a system that is truly African, not just a system that is coming from somewhere? Because you see, the reason why I argue that it is a system of control is that now we use it as a system of control, because when democracy is failing, we say we are going to go and give donor money for it to work. And so we pile in money, but the money has to go to be attached now to a poor country that is struggling, and then you attach the assistance to the democratic models. So now democracy is the one that is controlling whether you are going to develop or not. And that's why I argue that democracy has become a system of control rather than a system to develop a country. And I do not diss democracy. I think I've studied democracy here and I've seen it work, and I believe it is a good system. But I think that it is a good system where it has grown organically. And we need a good system for Africa would be a system that was allowed to grow organically in Africa as well.
So do African nations need to rethink relationship between constitutional law, culture, and traditional leadership?
That is exactly what I'm saying. That is exactly what I'm saying. We need to start rethinking this. And there's a very big challenge, because we now have, because of the proliferation of democracy and 60 years of democratic oppression, if you allow me to put it that way. I'm using the term very loosely, so please do not. But after 60 years odd of democracy in Africa, what we have, we now have what I call epistemological capture, which is that even our scholars, even our thinkers, the so-called intelligent African leaders and so on, they only think in terms of democracy. They do not think in terms of anything else. Now, there's a very, very good reason for that. It is the fact that if you try to think outside of the democratic box, then you know, those ideas are quickly shut down. They are quickly criticized and unsupported. But legitimacy cannot arise from democracy in the way that it is being presented alone. We have to think about how we can create legitimate systems that either are very, very democratic or quasi-democratic, but which work in our own African settings, and that might require a work that means that, you know, a foundational work that goes to assess exactly what it is that we can do to work, and that's what I speak about in my other book, which is the African Manifesto, because I try to explore those ideas.
Because a good leader must take the people from where they are to where they want to go.
Absolutely. Yes.
See, a good leader is leading.
Yes.
You must have people behind you.
Yes.
And take them exactly and give them what they need.
Yeah.
So if you were advising, well, because you've been a president's advisor.
Yes.
So if you were advising the next generation of African presidents, what would be the 3 most important priorities they should focus on over the next decade? Well,
I think the first one is epistemological and the idea of rethinking the democratic model. If I was advising a new leader, I would say to them, can you look at perhaps asking your law commission, asking your parliament to review and revise the constitutions that we have, so that these constitutions you can bring in other elements of African governance which are not at the moment are being suppressed, or they have been completely ignored by the democratic model. So that's number one. Number two, I think that it's very, very important to recognize that across Africa, we need to have an understanding of where economic prosperity comes from. What I'm speaking about here is the fact that, if you think about our economic models, again, they have been handed to us by IMF and the World Bank. And in Malawi, for example, Malawi was on a good trajectory when it was under one government, one power as a one-party state. It was on a very good economic trajectory because a lot of infrastructure was under state control. But IMF and World Bank came and said, you need to privatize these things. And then, of course, once that happened, everything fell down. Why? Because a lot of investment that develops and grows a country is capital heavy. And private actors are always going to look at their profit margin rather than servicing the various countries.
You have been advisor to the late President Mutharika.
Yeah.
If you were advising the next generation of African presidents, what will be the three most important priorities they should focus on for the next decades?
So that's very important because I think, we tend to simply follow what is happening around the world in Africa, and I think that my advice now, having studied, and having experienced a lot of what I have done, which was not there when I was advising Mutharika, I would say that one of the most important things that leaders need to recognize is epistemological capture. There is a way of looking at Africa that needs to be done by Africans and not be given handed to us by people that just know or hear about Africa. So leaders should listen to and promote African solutions to African problems, and that's very quick. That's very important. Sure. And related to that is rethinking the model itself of governance for Africa. We cannot continue to simply think that something that has been written in Paris or Geneva or in Washington D.C. as a document, we'll take it to Africa and it's going to work. No. Africa needs to begin to look at how we can redesign governance in Africa that makes sense for Africans. And then thirdly, I think it is a question of an economic point, which is that Africans need to realize that economic models that come from the Bretton Woods institutions, World Bank and IMF, quite a few of them, in fact, maybe most of them have failed in Africa. The reason is because the ecosystems in Africa, the systems are too young to support the ideas that they are advocating. I was giving an example of Malawi, where during the one-party state, the government owned a lot of the infrastructure, and the country's infrastructure was growing because government can build a railway line. Government can build an airport. We're not expecting to get profit immediately. But when Bretton Woods institutions come and they say privatize the airport, privatize the railway line, privatize that, then you discover that now the private institutions, when they take over these things, they're looking at the profit margin. And so because they're looking at the profit margin, if it's a road or if it is a bus company that is supposed to save the village, but only 4 people travel to that particular village in a week, then that route is going to be cut off. And because that route is cut off, what they don't know is that that's the only service that is there to carry goods and carry business, produce and stuff for the villagers in that area. So
That's a very good point.
And so when you cut it off because you're saying, oh, it's not profitable anymore because you want to privatize it, what you're doing is you're killing growth in that regard. While as the government was keeping that going because they knew that it was not just a matter of profit, it was also a matter of keeping that particular village connected to the ecosystem of the whole country to make sure that these people are also getting transportation for their stuff and so on. And so that means that privatization has to be looked at in a very different way. I would advise African leaders today to rethink state investment models that are completely written off. They have been criticized by Brethren institutions to say that you don't need that. But then again, when you think about it historically, you discover that if you come to the UK, for example, the telephones and the telephone networks, the BT used to be a government state-owned. If you think about Royal Mail, that used to be state-owned until it became so big that then when the country was ready for it to be privatized, then they were privatized. If you look at the railway lines, up to now, the government still has a say on who takes the contracts on the rail transportation systems. So, but when you come to Africa, we are told privatize.
Gone.
You see what I'm saying? And so, because of that, now the logic can sound true. They say that, oh, but that's because the state then used to use these and capture them, and they were sites of corruption and all that, and then inefficiency and all this sort of criticism that they say. But why were they captured? They would go back to the democratic model all over again. You see what I mean? And so when you fix the democratic model, then you fix this economic model over here, which has been completely trashed by the Brethren institutions, you discover that Southern Africa begins to rise. And then you get academia, and I think you said 3, but I would add a 4th. And the 4th is that African leaders should surround themselves with intelligent and smart people. And they should listen, not surround themselves with this just to decorate themselves, to say that, I've appointed a PhD, and then you suppress them when they start giving you the advice that you don't like to hear. I lament, for example, in my country, where presidents surround themselves with people that haven't even finished high school. These guys are given ministerial positions and so forth, and so they go and start commanding police officers. You give a person who didn't finish high school, Minister of Home Affairs.
So much power.
And so he's in charge of an Inspector General of Police who is a PhD. That creates a friction that can never really be resolved, because he doesn't know the whole thing that this man is doing when he's trying to do this, but his power is the political stick. And because of that, you discover that systems crumble because African leaders surround themselves with people who do not really fully understand what governing is all about.
Going back to anecdote you just gave about privatizing, about Bretton Woods institutions, do you think the structural adjustment hasn't worked for Africa?
No. I think that structural adjustments came as a way of trying to resolve a problem that has been created elsewhere.
Okay.
You see what I mean? The problem has been created by bad governance system and by this whole privatization systems that are not supposed to have been done in that way in the first place. And so when you're bringing solutions, you're bringing solutions. You create the disease and then you give a medicine to the disease when you haven't even diagnosed it properly. So for me, the structural adjustment systems and frameworks, they operate downstream of the problem. What you really need to do is to solve the upstream side of the problem. What is creating?
So not the symptom, by the
but the condition itself. So that's where our solutions should be directed.
Okay. We have talked about, you've worked in Africa, in Australia, you've been everywhere. So you literally member of diaspora, we can say, living abroad. In some ways. So what role you think the African diaspora play in rebuilding institutions across the continent?
Well, that's a very, very important point, because you see, at the moment, one of the challenges affecting Africa now is that a lot of African countries are in what I call an illegitimate governance loop. That means that the system has run for so long that now everybody believes that in order for one to be successful, you have to be close to power. Power is the only game in town. You see what I mean? And so what that means, though, is that to try and reform the system from the inside is very, very difficult because the systems have become closed systems. And so everybody simply thinks, okay, the best thing is to enter the system. And once I enter the system, play according to the rules of the game, which is the rules of being close to power. As close to power as you can. The closer to power you are, the more successful you're going to be, and so forth. So this grammar has created a problem, which means that reform must come from the outside. Okay. And that's a new framework that I'm working on. It's called Strategic Civil Society Uprising. Okay. But I think one of the core points and core factors for it to be successful is the role of the diaspora, because they are not part of the loop. So they can see the problems from the outside, and they can also help and sponsor ideas so that then can smash the loop from the outside. Now, diaspora people who are living over here, they are very good at lamenting the problem, but not putting their action, their hand into the problem to try and fix it. But you know, when I come here because I travel a lot. I do a lot of consulting work in Africa, but even though I'm based here, and when I come here and I live, I stay, I talk to diaspora friends. The common song, the common theme is, oh, but Africa this, but Africa that, you guys, you know, and so forth. So they're separating themselves from the problem, when in fact they should be saying our problem. Yes. If you think about the liberation movement, diaspora played a very, very important role. But it played an important role because of the very reason that they were not in the system. So if you think about the Nkrumahs, if you think about Kamuzu Bandas, all these guys came from outside. They came from outside, went to Africa, and then helped to change the system. They didn't just talk. Some of them, they didn't just talk, and some of them used their funds. Some of them supported in various ways. So the role of the diaspora today is to break the illegitimate governance loops using frameworks that can work, and providing the support, whether it's manpower, whether it's financial support, whether it is intellectual support, to the people that are trying to resolve this issue, not just condemn. I think that is where we get it wrong. Condemnation or diagnosis is good, but if you stop at diagnosis, if you stop at condemning, what are you doing? Nothing. You are not helping at all. You are simply singing a song that has been sung many, many times before you, and is going to continue to be sung. So I'm appealing, actually, to the diaspora today that there are many people in Africa that want to change the systems, that are trying to change our systems. Identify those people and then support them in whatever way you can, not just with words, not just by criticizing. Find ways, practical ways, in which, as people who are out here, you know, in Malawi, for example, the movements during the colonial system. It was people from the diaspora who used to go to Westminster and make speeches there to say, we want independence, we need liberation, and so on and so on. But the diaspora of today, they're just happy working their cool job in London and you know, sending criticisms back home.
Right. Coming back to your books, your books combine personal experience with political analysis. Which of your works do you think, or you believe, best captures your vision for Africa, and why?
I think the African Manifesto is the vision, because of obviously the title as well. Because in there I talk about what Africa has got, what we are, who we are as Africa, that may have been misunderstood by those that came to try and help us govern ourselves. And then I move from that diagnosis to prescribing what can be done with regard to addressing the challenges that have been created by these particular points of view and these particular realities that we have found ourselves in the past 50 to 60 years. And so I would recommend that if people want to read about what really can us as an African, especially African leaders, they want, you know, if a leader doesn't have, you know, a place to begin, that, reform Africa. Where should I start? I think if they can read the African Manifesto, they might get a few ideas as to how they can formulate some new policies.
Okay, what message are you hoping readers to take away from after reading the African Manifesto?
First of all, the fact that Africa can rise again.
Okay.
60 years of fumbling around,
So
not fully appreciating the so-called benefits that democracy promised. I think what we have learned, and that's part of my diagnosis, is that what democracy has demonstrated is that it's not working. You do not continue treating something for 60 years. I think after 60 years of something not working, a good doctor would say, maybe I'm putting the wrong medicine on this thing, or maybe I should go back and see, did I diagnose the right disease? But unfortunately, we seem to be piling on. No. What we need is more capacity building, more laws, more democracy. No. I think that, and that's what I say in the African Massive. If someone is going to get something away, they'll discover that there is another way, there is another path. And that is what the African Manifesto is about. It's about trying to find that other path that can change things that we have gotten wrong for the past 60 years.
At the beginning, I said I did listen to your music.
Yes.
I watched the videos.
Yes.
And it's come spiritual.
Yes.
It's gospel. And, as a man of law, as a prosecutor, as politician, how do you combine being a Christian and being a prosecutor, a law, an advisor to presidents?
Yeah.
How do they go together?
No, I don't see any tension. Like I said to you, ultimately now I have settled into a space where I know that my life's work really and my life's trajectory has always been the study of power, my observation of power. And, when you think about it at at its core, religion is also about power. Right. It is also about authority, and so there is absolutely no, especially Christianity, which is where I am. I'm a Christian, but even other religions, I study other religions because I do want to study authority and power, and so I've looked at Islam and see how power relates within the Islamic religion. Yeah. I've looked at other religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, and see what their power structures are like, and when you think about it from that perspective, you discover that there is actually no tension at all. And so my music, which is essentially Christian, also explores the concepts of power within the Christian faith and authority within the Christian faith. And of course, from a Christian perspective, then we look at authority as coming from an absolute authority and looking at why does God command or deserve absolute authority in our lives and things like that. But then that also sort of helps inform, because you see, the Christian argument is that God is in a covenant with his people, and he promises certain things that he's going to do, and the people are expected to do certain things towards that particular covenant. And that relationship is a relationship of an authority and the people that are being governed. And when you think about our governance systems, it's exactly the same thing. The social contract, the democratic framework is exactly the same thing. It's about a state promising certain things and the citizen accepting this state as the authority in their lives, and also saying that we are going to do certain things. If you look at religions like Islam and so on, everything really gravitates around the legitimacy of authority. And so because of that, you can see now that there is actually a straight line that goes and connects all these dots.
Okay. Yeah. And that's some kind of faith.
Yes. Faith comes from the point of believing in the fact that there is a higher power than myself. There are higher powers that are metaphysical, that are transcendence we cannot see. You have to start from that belief. Now, there are places in academia where I cannot speak about that because, when you start speaking about God, people look at you funny and say, what is that all about? But I'm developing a new theory, and this is called the bifurcated self-consciousness theory. And this theory basically argues that within any and every human being are two opposing forces. One force that says, I'm just another animal, like a dog and so forth, which gravitates towards the evolution of man. But there is also another force within the mind, the human mind, within the human psychic, that argues that I cannot be just another animal. Because when I look at a dog and I look at myself, when I look at a shark and I look at myself, I feel that I'm more superior in terms of my intelligence and more in terms of the way that I am made as compared to this. So these two are opposing sides, but they are always in every human being. And it is the way in which you respond to these opposing ideas that are in your mind, that's what creates faith. So you can have faith in the one side. I call that the autonomous reason, which is the one that rejects the metaphysical transcendence. And the MT, the metaphysical transcendence, says, no, I am not just another animal. I think I was created, and there is a designer that designed me. And so you try to look up and say, who is the designer, and what am I? What is my purpose? You know what I'm saying? So these are concepts which I'm exploring in a theory. But they explain why, obviously you can tell that obviously I obviously gravitate towards the metaphysical transcendence side, while as other people gravitate more towards the autonomous reason side.
Okay, talking about faith, what role faith played in helping you navigate difficulty in politics moments and personal challenges?
Faith is very important, because there are a lot of things that we cannot explain. Our own intelligence and books that we read cannot explain. If you go back to the philosophers in the past, and obviously I'm sure you see now that philosophy is one of my biggest pursuits. If you look at Socrates, you look at Plato and all those guys, Aristotle, you discover that they had the same. They basically had the same questions. Who are we? Where do we come from? And so on. And faith is the one that helps you answer those questions, especially in times when what you're saying doesn't seem to resonate properly with what you know. And so faith helps you navigate that. And when things are happening maybe that you don't understand, or when people are pushing you out, or when your reforms are not being accepted, then you have the faith to comfort you, to say, well, maybe it was not the right time, maybe God wanted this to happen at a different time. Well, as somebody else would despair and say, well, what's going on? Maybe I need to just write a better reform paper. You see what I'm saying?
TV's time. I got two last questions I'll ask you. When historians will write about Africa 50 years from now, what do you hope they will say about this generation, this current generation?
I would like, I don't know what they'll say, but I would want them to say that our generation observed the 60 years of democratic failures and decided to do something about it.
Democratic failure.
Yes, I think so. I think democracy has failed in Africa. This is the bottom line. I cannot apologize for that statement.
Powers.
Yes, but there are powers that believe in democracy so much that it's not going to be easy to come to a point where we accept this and begin to redesign Africa in a way that acknowledges that particular problem. But I would love to think that 50 years from now, that's the time people will look at this moment, these moments, our generation as the generation that recognize that. Because before us, I don't think that there are many people that have been saying democracy has failed. No. It is our generation that is acknowledging this issue. And so this acknowledgement should be the beginning of a new African transformation.
Finally, if you had one message for young people watching right now, we got students, entrepreneurs, activists, and future leaders, what would it be?
I would say to young people that the duty of intelligence is to look up. And what I mean by that is that do not always accept the narrative as it is. The reason why people have made if you study people that have made great strides in knowledge, great inventions, great new ideas that have come into the world is because of the refusal to be given or to accept what has been given and always challenge the conventional thought. If you look at what is happening in Africa now, Nigeria, Tanzania, and so on in most of these countries, if we do not look up, we are going to accept this diluting of democracy that is going on there, and we don't have time to go into the details, but I'm just trying to give you examples of places, hotspots of things that are happening. Corruption, we have discussed that. Why is it happening? Don't just accept it. Question why it's happening. Look beyond the narrative. And when you do that, you come up with solutions, and then do not let anybody say, test your solutions. Find ways of testing your ideas and push forward. Because today the problem is we are comfortable in little comfort zones. Maybe we got a job, maybe we got a little this and that, and we don't want to challenge anything as long as at least I can go and watch a football match. No, the Africa we have today came from people that refused to accept conventional narratives of oppression and colonialism that were there in the 60s and in the 50s. Now we have got a completely different kind of colonization. We've got a mindset colonization. We've got epistemological colonization that I've spoken about. For the young generation today, they need to challenge that, because that's the only way we're going to move forward.
Mr. Ntata, thank you for sharing your insights, your experience, and your vision.
Thank you very much. I hope it was
really good to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Well, conversations like this remind us Africa's future depends not only on strong institutions, but also courageous ideas, ethical leadership, and informed citizens. To our viewers across Africa and all over the world, thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please like, subscribe, and share the interviews so that this important conversation reach everybody around the world. Until next time, keep believing in Africa, keep building Africa, and keep the conversation alive. Until next time, we'll see you.